how is anyone supposed to, first of all, know who it is that they're interacting with?
There has been a lot of concern about immigration enforcement across the country. ICE agents are masked, their badges are hidden, and many argue they are disrupting communities. Under Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, DHS has killed more than 20 people, including in Minneapolis, where DHS officers killed Renee Good and Alex Preddy. ICE agent Jonathan Ross killed Renee Good, and both Jesus Ochoa and Raimundo Gutierrez killed Alex Preddy. Their deaths are only 2 of 3 where names have been revealed by investigative journalists since the beginning of 2025. In Buffalo last month, agents took Nurul Amin Shah Alam into custody in Erie County on a non-immigration charge. Shah Alam was nearly blind, did not speak English, and had serious medical issues. And after realizing that they could not detain him, DHS dropped him off at a Tim Hortons 5 miles from his home. His family was not notified, and he was found dead 5 days later. State Senator Stephanie Chang in the Michigan Senate, a Detroit Democrat, along with other Democrats, have introduced bills to unmask ICE and restrict their access in churches, hospitals, and schools. Chang is the daughter of 2 Taiwanese immigrants who emigrated to the United States to work in the auto industry. Her legislation had a bit of a viral moment last week when she got into it with State Senator Jim Runestad, a White Lake Township Republican, who expressed frustration over her handling as chair of the committee overseeing the legislation. Hello and welcome to The Moment from WLNS Plus. I am your host, Brad LaPlante, and each week I invite a major player in Michigan politics to come in and have a chat. In this episode, Chang spoke with me about the ICE bills and why she thinks immigration enforcement is out of control. Here is my interview with Stephanie Chang. You were the first Asian American woman in the Michigan legislature, and you were also the first woman to give birth while serving in the Senate.
Those are both true.
Those are both
They're
true.
facts.
How has that changed the way that colleagues listen to you, or not, on issues like public safety and immigration?
That's a great question. So I think that, well, I don't know if it's changed. You'd have to ask a colleague how it's impacted their perception of me. But I think for me, I definitely think that both being a mom legislator and also being an Asian American woman and a proud daughter of immigrants has certainly shaped the things that I focus on, the values that I bring to the legislature, the work that I do, really focused on trying to uplift values like opportunity and access and fairness and justice for everyone. And so I think that my own identities are part of who I am. And so they certainly impact the work that I do. And I also think that, being a mom, so I started in the legislature in 2015. When I was pregnant, actually, with my first daughter. So it's been, this kind of simultaneous journey of motherhood and public service at the same time. I think when it comes to public safety and immigration and immigrants' rights issues, obviously I've got sort of the track record of working on these issues for a long, long time, even prior to being in the legislature. And I do think that being an Asian American woman, as well as being now a mom who cares deeply about, the future that we're trying to build for my children's generation, certainly impacts the fact that I have spent a lot of time working on these issues. And I hope that by bringing light to many of the stories that are happening in our community right now, that is something that hopefully is, I hope will resonate with some of my colleagues, because some of us come at this from not just the perspective of serving our community, but also coming from immigrant communities as well.
And how has being a mom, how has that impacted, and not just being a mom, but giving birth specifically, right? And I say this as a new father because I'm wondering, about medical debt, issues like that, right? Did that change your perspective at all, or just kind of maybe it reaffirmed something that you already knew, or what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, prior to coming in the legislature, there were a lot of issues that I cared about, a lot of issues that I had worked on. But then actually becoming a legislator and then becoming a mom shortly after entering the legislature put a lot of more things into perspective. So the issues that we work on, whether it's maternal health issues or education, I mean, I'm thinking literally about my kids, right? And I think about the types of safety that our communities deserve and many of the injustices that have happened during my time in the legislature, and having to explain to my daughters in hopefully age appropriate ways about what has happened. I think makes everything is the personal is political and vice versa, right? So I think that being a mom, raising these two amazing kids, I think has really shaped a lot of the work that I've been doing. And also, it helps to reaffirm sort of like my commitment to the work that we need to do because our kids, your kid, congratulations, our kids deserve the best possible future.
And you've been framing your position over the course of the time that you've been in the Michigan legislature. You've been positioning yourself as a candidate that gets, or a legislator that gets things done. And I want to know what that looks like right now in the Michigan Senate, where our politics are polarized and you have a one seat majority. What does that look like behind the scenes?
Well, it's a little messy behind the scenes, and we try to make sure that doesn't ever come too clearly forward, right? But it's a lot of conversations, a lot of one-on-one talking with colleagues, a lot also of you know coalition building, and because I come to this work um, as an organizer, so I'm an organizer turned public servant, right? So um, building coalitions is what I do and what I will continue to do probably long after. So finding ways to like bring unlikely allies on board with certain issues, finding ways to understand what is the thing that is happening, you know, across the state that will make someone also care about an issue, maybe from just a slightly different point of view, and what policies need to shift in order to work for everyone. So I think that getting things done has always been Team Chang's slogan. And because that it's really what we're about, right? And so, I'm a strong fighter, I think, for a lot of the values that we have. And at the same time, I've also built a pretty strong track record of getting bipartisan things done, even, when I was in the minority. And so it takes a lot of conversations, building relationships, really digging deep into issues and trying to get creative in figuring out ways that we can bring more people along. And of course, it takes compromise, right? And so many of the things that I have either gotten across the finish line or close to have involved, lots of changes to bills throughout the process, which is totally normal, but in a way that makes sure that we're reflective of the bipartisan nature of our current legislature in terms of the work that we need to do and that Michiganders really deserve to see.
Now, I'm going to turn to your immigration bills, or the set of bills that you've introduced, given our how ICE is operating across the United States. And we did not see a operation as large as the one that took place in Minnesota, in Michigan yet. Uh, but I want you to walk me through the moment that you realized that Michigan needs its own set of guardrails on immigration enforcement. And was there a single case or a call that shifted this concern to I'm going to draft bills?
So sort of going backwards, right? I've been working on immigrants' rights issues for a very long time, and during my time in the legislature, have been working on issues like driver's licenses for immigrants and also others who don't have the papers to prove legal status. And then when Trump got elected to his second term, I think that a lot of us, as lawmakers as well as immigrants' rights organizations, others who just care about this issue, um, did a lot of thinking about, well, what are the things that we need to do? What are the things that we need to try to put in place in terms of policy? And so there actually has been a very deliberative process of working with groups like the Michigan Immigrants' Rights Center and Meet Poder and Rising Voices and the ACLU of Michigan, and like a whole crew of organizations that have been doing work on the ground for just such a long time, in trying to figure out, well, what are the things that are possible? What are the things that are the most likely to potentially pass a chamber, or, as far as we can get? But I also think that it has been a bit of a journey, right? Because at the same time that we're advocating for policy, people are literally trying to help people fight their deportations, and taking phone calls and trying to help get people mutual aid and trying to support family that is still here who has now lost oftentimes breadwinners to deportation. And so I just truly recognize that there's a lot going on right now. And so for many of the organizations that have been doing this work and have been trying to support, whether it's through legal services or mutual aid or advocacy or direct, just connecting people to resources, it actually, we knew that things were going to get bad. I don't think we knew that things were going to get as bad as they have been in Minnesota and in other places. And honestly, I think it's really important to make sure that people know that in Michigan, right, immigration enforcement, while it may not be to the same level as Minnesota has been, the number of folks who are in detention or have faced deportation is much higher than it has been previously. And so we talk to people on a very regular basis with new calls coming in, new reports of people getting picked up, getting detained, being ripped apart from their families, and it's kind of a constant thing. So there isn't necessarily any one particular case that spurred us to work together on developing this legislation, but there's certainly case after case after case of folks that we have been working with that have propelled us to fight harder, work harder.
I know that you can't read minds, right? And you can't know somebody's intentions without asking them, of course. But does it feel to you that the Trump administration is not just going after illegal immigration, that they are trying to obstruct immigrants of all kinds from getting a pathway to citizenship?
It's unclear. I think it's unclear, right? I think that what's the clearest is what the impact is. I think is less clear is like exactly what the motivation is. However, I do think that it is important to point out, right? So you referenced the fact that the current administration is arresting and detaining and deporting people who, I mean, it's just a wide array, right? Oftentimes people think, oh, they're going, because the rhetoric is about they're going after dangerous criminals. Whereas the reality, which has been proven time after time, like statistics after statistics. There was recently, a report from the Cato Institute, which is not a liberal organization, about the fact that the vast majority of folks that are getting detained and deported have no criminal background whatsoever.
Yeah, I think the number that I read was actually 14% have a criminal background.
It's astronomically low, right? And so the vast majority of folks that are being ripped apart from their families they're our neighbors, right? They're construction workers, small business owners, Amazon Flex drivers, right? Just people working, trying to provide for their families. Some of them have been here for a very long time. Others are more recent migrants, but all of them, came here either fleeing persecution or war or devastation in a home country. Or some of the folks who have been deported are actually, folks who have been here for literally decades, who came here as refugees. And so the impact is very real. I think one thing I wanted to mention, while it's not, I can't get inside people's heads to understand what people's motivations are, but what I do know, right, is that there are organizations who have had a strong influence on many of the policies that the Trump administration has put forward. And one of those organizations is FAIR. So they are a very conservative right-wing organization that actually the Southern Poverty Law Center has deemed a hate group. And if you go back to the history of this organization, they have some eugenicists that are a part of the founding of this organization. And I know that there are members of that organization who are actually, part of or very influential in this administration. And so there are, you can look them up and read quotes of actual things that leaders of this organization have said over the years, which are basically about having less people of color in this country. And so I think that is interesting to think about, right? And it's also horrifying. But I think it's really important to know that there are organizations who have been working on trying to advance the policies that the Trump administration is now doing. They have been doing this work for a very long time. And so now we are at this point where we're actually seeing it on the ground. But how many decades did it take to actually build up, in the folks who are currently in power, the policies and apparently the political will to devastate communities in this way.
Senate Bill 510, which is, so there's 3 bills and there's a Senate resolution in the Michigan Senate. Senate Bill 510 takes on masked, unidentified officers, which some people have expressed a lot of concern, right? I mean, when federal immigration officers shot and killed both Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minnesota, it was very hard to identify who those people were.
Yeah.
And typically, after any person in law enforcement discharges his weapon, usually that person is put under some sort of thorough investigation as to why that happened, and their name is usually released, especially if it was a deadly shooting. And just for accountability of a federal agent, that is something that's very important, right? And it wasn't, if not for the Minnesota Star Tribune, and I know the New York Times had a hand in identifying Jonathan Ross, who was the ICE agent who shot and killed Renee Good. And then you had ProPublica identify the 2 officers who shot and killed Alex Preddy. If not for these journalists, we might not know who these officers were, and that all leads to accountability at the end of the day. I think that concerns a lot of people. However, Republicans and ICE and DHS have fought against these efforts to unmask these federal agents. And I want to know what your response is to when ICE says or DHS says that these officers and these agents need anonymity to stay safe.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we've heard that talking point and response several times. So first, just a huge amount of gratitude I want to share for Senators Mary Kavanaugh and Jeremy Moss, who are true partners in this effort and have been doing an amazing job lifting up these policies as well as just this issue and the stories behind all of them. I think this issue of masks is interesting because if you've removed how people feel about immigrants, I think that most people would agree that building trust between law enforcement or any uniformed person, or in this case, not always even uniformed, and the community is really important to build or rebuild or try to restore. And you can't do that if the person you're interacting with, you have no idea who they are, right? And so we've got people showing up in unmarked cars, maybe in uniform, maybe not, a mask. How is anyone supposed to, first of all, know who it is that they're interacting with? And also, we have now people who are pretending to be ICE agents, wearing masks, who are assaulting people. Like, this is documented. I do not ever condone violence, and so for any federal agents who have been attacked, or that's unacceptable. At the same time, I think it's really important to make sure, if you're in a position of authority with a badge and a firearm, it is really important that the public knows who you are in order to facilitate an interaction that is safe for everyone. And so, with Renee Good, Alex Preddy, Keith Porter, the list goes on, for the folks who have been killed by ICE agents, there are so many different things that maybe could have gone differently in those interactions, right? And so if you remove the mask, would that have solved all of it? I don't know, but it certainly would have at least been one less thing that led to a fatality, right? And so when you can't know who someone is, and when there's zero trust because you literally don't know who you're interacting with, that seems just very clearly common sense that it's going to potentially lead to worse outcomes.
Do you, and I'm going to ask you a hard question, but do you think, some Democrats have called for the abolition of ICE? Do you think that Democrats should go that far, given the just total lack of trust among ICE and other immigration authorities?
So I think Democrats, we're a broad tent. There's a whole lot of different opinions on this, right? I am of the firm belief that the current agency, first of all, didn't used to exist. It has not always existed. We did not always need this agency, and perhaps we don't actually need this agency. Immigration is actually a civil matter, and there are well-trained folks who know how to handle immigration matters that are not out there terrorizing communities. So I would love to see some really bolder change, whether that whatever words people want to use, right? Some people are saying abolish ICE, some people are saying defund, some people are saying, like, we just need to start over, right? I think that the fact of the matter is, I think many people share the same goal of, like, let's actually have an immigration system that works, because what we have clearly doesn't work, right? And people have tried for decades to try and reform our immigration system. And while that, I still have hope that will one day, hopefully sooner rather than later, get done. In the meantime, people need to be treated with dignity and respect. And also, this current agency is just indiscriminately taking people from their homes, from their workplaces, from, their own immigration court hearings. And I think it's very clear where the American people and where Michiganders stand on this. There's overwhelming support for addressing many of the injustices that are happening. The ACLU of Michigan recently did a poll that shows that 70% of Michiganders support the idea of addressing sensitive locations, so protecting schools, churches, places of worship, hospitals, etc., from immigration enforcement without a warrant. 65% support the mask bill as well as the data privacy bill. So I think the people are on our side, because I think they see, right, because there's now at this point so many videos and footage of all the things that have been happening. So I think there's big change that is needed. I am also, while I believe that we need those bigger, bolder changes, I also am a firm believer that we need to do whatever we can and whatever is possible in this moment, which is why we're working on these bills in particular.
And I think that Democrats have struggled over the last, what feels like for a long time, to get a proper stance on immigration. I think that Republicans have framed Democrats as though they want open borders, that, border crossings are, higher than ever under Democratic administration, specifically under Joe Biden. The interesting that's not often talked about, and forgive me if I don't know the full context of what happened here, but I do remember reading about how Joe Biden immigration ended up he got a lot of pushback for the amount of border crossings in the United States from Mexico, and he ended up closing the border, and actually border crossings ended up going down dramatically. And I don't want to say that maybe the problem was fixed necessarily, but it seemed like he was taking that step to address the pushback that he had received. And nobody talked about that because it was almost like it was too late. It had been done too late. And I think that that kind of compounds to how Republicans are framing Democrats as though they want open borders. And I think that that's been a big messaging opportunity for Democrats to get right, especially as we come up to the midterms and we're looking ahead. What is that challenge like? I mean, obviously, uh, I don't think many people want just anybody to come in. I think that people think that there should be a process. But where do you stand on what do you think the Democratic Party needs to do better in terms of making sure that their message isn't misunderstood, but also not leaving behind the people who are coming here as refugees or are looking for a path to citizenship and doing it the right way?
Yeah. So I think would love to just really briefly share about Ernesto. So Ernesto Cuevas Enciso, he came here as a 3-year-old with his parents and siblings, and previously had DACA. So he had status, had driver's license. Has a 1-year-old at home, U.S. citizen, a wife who's a U.S. citizen, does construction work, was apprehended by ICE or some federal agency, maybe ICE, in Ypsilanti when he was just literally on his way to his work site in Ypsilanti in December, I think, or November. It was a couple months ago. I think this is a really important story to tell because he also has an application pending for legal permanent residency. And so when we talk about what are the policies that Democrats push for, what are the policies that hopefully one day if we can actually come to agreement on, is someone like Ernesto, I think truly deserves the chance to become a citizen and should not be up at North Lake Processing Center in Baldwin right now. Right. So I think it's important for Democrats and just anyone who cares about this issue to keep telling these stories, because I think when you personalize it, it hopefully makes a little bit more sense to people who are listening, right? So what type of immigration system do we want? I would say we want a system where people can come here seeking opportunity. We vet who they are. We give them a chance and a path towards citizenship, especially, but not just including young people, right? So Ernesto had DACA. We have clearly failed to make that system permanent. But there's others too who come here, whether they're seeking asylum because they have, basically escaped countries where there has been it's literally not safe for them to be there. We have failed to even have the right number of judges to be able to process asylum cases. So instead, now people are losing their TPS status because we didn't process their asylum cases in time. So then instead now we're locking them up and then deporting them. Like, that just doesn't make sense. If we know that someone is not a threat, wants to contribute to our community, is going to work hard, and is going to build ties in the community, as many of these people already have, it makes no sense to detain and deport them when we, as a country, have always prided ourselves. I still believe we pride ourselves on being a beacon of hope and opportunity. And so we should continue to be that. We are better because of immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers. And so we need to actually put the systems in place to give people the opportunity to go through instead of putting up roadblock after roadblock to actually do things the right way.
Interesting. And I want to leave with one more question. And you brought up the facility in Baldwin, Michigan, right? The North Lake Processing Center, I believe it's called.
Yep.
It's a private prison that it detains people who have been arrested by immigration officials. And recently, I'm sure you heard that U.S. Representatives Haley Stevens and Hillary Skolton, who Stevens in southeast Michigan and then Skolton represents Grand Rapids, both went to tour that facility because after a Bulgarian national, Nenko Ganchev, died on the floor there, right? And he was found unresponsive in his cell. He was found dead, and that is concerning because people are asking questions about how that happened, right? What was your reaction? Stevens and Skolton both had said that they didn't get any answers, and it was more of a sanitized visit. They didn't, the facility knew that they were coming, and they weren't any closer to answers than when they started. Is that concerning for you, and what was your reaction to that story?
Yeah. So I first learned of Nenko Ganchev's death back in December, basically like the day after it happened. I think even before it hit the news. And I think what we're seeing is just still a lack of transparency, right? We still don't have, there's now like a 1-page summary on ICE's website about his death. What's true in there and what's not, or what's missing, I don't know, right? Who did they talk to in this investigation? Has there been a thorough investigation? Did they talk to people who saw what happened? I have heard things, but I don't know, right? There's no way for me to personally just verify everything that I've heard about how they either improperly or properly responded to his calls for help. But I think that this is unfortunately part of a larger problem, right? Because we continue to hear reports of problems up there, and thankfully none of them have led to someone dying after Nenko's death. But we have heard of, and again, it's impossible to have all of the details, but we've heard of attempted suicides. We've heard of issues with people not getting medical care. We've heard of people having to repeatedly ask for help in order to finally actually get some help. And I think that it's really important that people are given the proper care that they deserve, right? And I have a lot of questions about whether or not that's happening. And so we need greater transparency. I have visited North Lake Processing Center, but because I'm not a member of Congress, I'm not allowed to actually go on a tour. So I just went up for a normal visit with a friend to visit her brother. But I think that Michiganders do deserve to know more information, right? Because this is our taxpayer dollars going towards locking people up. The vast majority of them who pose no danger at all to any of us. So I think that we should have transparency. I am very much looking forward to whenever a full investigation report actually comes out, being able to dig into that. But I also think that a lot of us are kind of at the point now where we're not sure what information we can trust that's coming out of that agency.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Chang. I appreciate you joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, before we end this week's episode, I spoke with policy professional Erin Shore, who announced her campaign for Kara Hope's seat in the Michigan House. Hope announced that she was not seeking re-election earlier this year. I spoke with Shore, the wife of Lansing Mayor Andy Shore, who said the legislature had not been effective this session, and we talked about what she would do to change it. you work in the Department of State, right? And it seems like you've been around state government for quite a while, whether that's in the Department of State or I think a couple advocacy organizations. I'm trying to understand what made you want to go into, being a state legislator.
I have. I've been working for the past 4 years for the Department of State. I'm the legislative director for the department, for the secretary, working on voting rights issues, transportation driver issues. Um, and before that, with the Community College Association years, I served as their lobbyist and as vice president of the association. And I was on staff in the House of Representatives for about 10 years in various roles. So all told, I've been working in public service here in Lansing for about 25 years, really just trying to figure out how I can best help people. I graduated with a master's in public policy from U of M and then came up here trying to do that. And so when the opportunity arose to run for state representative, I thought we have just had such excellent representation here in the Lansing area, whether that's Kara Hope, Sarah Anthony, Joan Bauer. And I really wanted to make sure that we continue to have somebody strong who can bring resources back to the area, who can make sure that our voices are being heard and really can hit the ground running. And I believe with my background, I could be that person.
I know that Kara Hope had announced that she wasn't seeking re-election for this seat. I think it was last month. Right, because it is still February. Time is flying by. Was there a moment, was it that announcement that you were like, come on, let's do this, or was it shortly after, or how long have you been thinking about this?
It was shortly after I started to hear from some folks around the community, some of the current legislators and some of the other people I've worked with who know my background, who know I've been on the ISD board for the past 12 years and just said, would you ever consider this? I know it's a big step. But that made me really think about it. And as I have been talking to people over the past month or so, have been pleased at the reception that I got to that question and their encouragement to look at running.
So I took a look at your website, right? And you have a number of endorsements from some notable state legislators, right? You have Singh, Moss, and then Representatives Whitwer, Morgan, and Skaggs. I am wondering, there's a big slate of endorsements, right? And so what pushed, I guess, what's the feedback been like from those endorsements? Like, what do you think they're saying about why you?
I think I have garnered so much support because of my experience, because in an era of term limits, people are hungry for someone that understands how to work the levers of state government, that really can take advantage of the time they have there, and that is prepared to talk to other folks, to listen, to learn from the other voices at the Capitol. As a representative, you're one of 110 members of the House, and you can't get anything done without 55 other representatives, 20 senators, and the governor. So it requires a great deal of collaboration and compromise and willingness to start with an idea that I think is fantastic to begin with and make it better by working with others. And I think others see that ability in me.
And I know that some people might be concerned about, you're married to Lansing Mayor Andy Shore, of course. I'm wondering what you might say to potential criticism about having consolidation in the, South. You would represent South Lansing, and then Mayor Andy Shore would, he's got a lot of pull in the city. Is there any, do you see any concerns with that consolidation, or is I guess, what do you say to that criticism?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm my own person, and I definitely have my own opinions about things. And second, I think the job of a state representative is to be out in the community and develop relationships and be listening to a lot of people, not just one. So the mayor is an important voice, certainly, when it comes to local government issues. And things that would affect the city, as would be the Delhi Township Supervisor and Board. But he's certainly not the only one. I would want to listen to all of the residents of the district and make my decisions accordingly.
Of course. And I know that you, from what I understand, are the first candidate to officially declare their intention to run their candidacy. Do you anticipate a competitive Democratic primary?
It's tough to say. The filing deadline's not until the third week of April or so. So anyone could still get in. I'm not hearing a number of other names at this point, but it's still early.
And then as far as issues go, is there anything that you think that you look at the Michigan House and you see the current delegation that's there. I'm wondering about what you think that the legislature is missing and what you can bring to that puzzle.
Well, certainly part of it comes down to leadership. I think this session in the Michigan House has been a disappointment. And that's certainly something that would be my goal if I were the Democratic nominee, to work hard to make sure that we change the leadership in the Michigan House. I think I have a lot of listening to do, but it doesn't take much to understand that people are concerned about costs, but they're concerned about the basic things that build a good life like we always have been. People want to make sure we have strong public schools and good access to colleges and universities if that's what their kids want to do. They want them to have access to jobs that hopefully keep them close to home. I have a 19 and a 21-year-old myself, and I would love to see them stay in Michigan. We want to focus on strong communities and whether we're able to put food on the table and also buy medicine without that bankrupting people. Not whether people are up doing press conferences and scapegoating people for who's making their life worse.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out.